Good morning, afternoon, evening, everybody. It is evening, well, early evening, I suppose, late afternoon. It is a nice 5 p.m. here where I'm at the base. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's got something nice to drink on here. If you are joining in, I've got a couple of things. I've got an Olipop, which is a soda type thing. It's apparently got prebiotics and botanicals and stuff like that. I don't know about all that stuff. That's all beyond my pay grade. But it tastes good. It's only 50 calories, so I'm rolling with it. Trying to balance out a little bit of the less than healthy food I had today. I went over to the bookstore I like, and I didn't get coffee and cake this time, as is what I usually like to do. I instead swung by because I hadn't eaten really since this morning when I did my workout, besides protein shake, and ended up grabbing some Culver's, because Culver's is so good, man. I had Culver's for the first time not too long ago, and I'm a believer now, man. I'm a believer. Didn't get a shake though. Got a Coke. I haven't had Coke in a long time, which was always nice. Love me some Coca-Cola. But yeah, guys. So as we're filtering in here, let's do a quick recap. So last time we have Alice, who is Aoko's roommate and teacher, and also a witch of no small renown, who has shown up and decided that she is going to take it into her hands to get rid of soujyuro. And Aoko, being the hard-headed, strong-willed lady that she is, decided that she didn't like Alice butting in on her deal with soujyuro to let him go for one singular day. And things got a little bit heated. Words were said. Alice threw out an attack towards soujyuro, and Aoko, on reaction, shot back at the attack to deflect it from soujyuro, and Alice took them as fighting words. Things escalated from there, and she released one of her big summons based off of the flat snark, which, if you know that tale, then you should be familiar. If not, then what is happening is that it takes everything around it in an area and ramps up the ludicrous, ridiculous fairy tale nature of it. So, being that they're in an abandoned amusement park, the entire amusement park is coming to life, the size of it is growing, and everything's trying to kill it. Well, kill them, being Aoko and soujyuro, there we go. So everything from the Ferris wheel coming alive, the roller coaster becoming a dragon, the life-size mascot thing coming to life and trying to kill them. There was even, very funnily, a lobster over one of the restaurants in the abandoned park. Came to life as a kaiju Godzilla-style monster. So it's been absolutely nuts. Aoko and soujyuro are about at the end of their wits now. So they've got to formulate a plan pretty dang quick, or Alice is going to absolutely eviscerate them. Oh, and by the way, all of this is the Snarks doing. Alice herself has done very little since they started to try and get out of the park. So Alice is just kind of chilling, and the flat snark, that isn't even the end of it, because it is just building up its energy, building up its power level, as you were, while all of this is going on. So we haven't even seen it actually throw hands properly yet. So alright. Let's get back into it. We left off right when they got surrounded again in this running escape that they're trying to do. Well, Aoko, everything's weird and impossible to Soujyuro, so that's probably not the best instructions.
おかしなやつって例えば
だから命のある人形とか空飛ぶゴーカートとか
Aoko paused her firing for a moment. After saying this out loud, she realized just how deep their grave was dug. The amusement park was a treasure trove of fairy tale-esque creatures on any given day. And who could say what was impossible amidst the newly transfigured knickknacks running around?
そっかおかしくないやつなんて一つもないんだ
Yeah, that dragon, as I mentioned, that dragon was at one point the roller coaster.
この中に紛れ込んでる
Alright, everybody. Make your bets now. What do you think the Snark is hiding as? What do you think it's taken as its form? Whoever managed to get it right will get a special pat on the back from me, because that's about all I can give you from here. Flat Snark was the type of ploy that deployed bounded fields. Now, if you remember, we talked about bounded fields and how they kind of work, so go back to one of the other videos previously and you'll get caught up. Seeing as it was commanding so many familiars, it would not be unusual for its main body to have little or even no defenses. Furthermore, if it was modeled from a story about it being untouchable or unidentifiable, it would be logical to assume that it would collapse in on itself shortly after being discovered.
逆に言えば見つければ私たちの勝ち
Oh, we have a win condition
そんな
now.
脆いやつが雑魚に紛れ込む木の葉を隠すのに森の中って言うけど
That card is still hanging out. Oh, not anymore. This was closer to the truth than Aoko realized. As long as there was the slightest possibility of it being hit by one of Aoko's stray bullets, it wouldn't dare appear in front of them, which makes sense. Its true form was orchestrating the park from somewhere safe. I'll give you guys a hint.
でもどこかに見えているはず
Well, that's a big hint. But also, where would it be to oversee what's actually going on?
スナークは本の主題だもの常にページのどこかにいないと主人公の資格がない
But where? Put very simply, the Ferris wheel was the safest location in the park, as well as a symbol of its past glory. Perhaps?
あの子を捕まえるのは
Her eyes opened wide at the sudden suggestion. While Aoko had been trying to come up with a plan to overcome the stalemate, it seems Soujyuro has been racking his brain as well. He's doing his best out here. His proposal was a simple one. If they could not find the Snark, they just needed to take out its master, Alice. I like it, straightforward, to the point. They got ambushed, so let's assault their ambush. Alice had not moved at all from the clock tower. Even from here, they can make out her figure, draped in moonlight.
それは一番ダメ
Shot down immediately.
アリスを殺してもフラットスナークは止まらないしこのトンデモが外に溢れ出すことになる
Ooh, that's an interesting detail. This is kind of the encounter of perpetual motion machines, I guess.
大体私じゃあの子を殺せないからよくて半殺しがいいところ
Which actually brings up a very interesting point. If it would boiled over to outside the park and started to take over Masaki Town and potentially even more, who would actually get involved at that point? Like, I would assume the clock tower and maybe the Atlas Institute, which I don't believe we've talked about the Atlas Institute on stream before, and they're complicated and weird. But long story short, they're mages who watch over and try and prevent the end of the world. Let's just keep it there, right? So the Clock Tower Association, the Mages Association, the big one, would probably at least look at it and go, huh, that's weird. I wonder if we should do something. Depending on how much of a problem the Snark is, the Atlas Institute might get involved, potentially. And I think probably the party that would get most interested in and probably actually try and do something about it might be the church. Because they've done some shenanigans before when mages have gotten a little bit out of hand, especially if there's no previous agreement governing what's going on. So maybe they might send some executors out there. Maybe maybe someone who's more of a specialist or top tier, like maybe CL or someone of that level. I don't know. That's an interesting thought. I don't know if that's was covered anywhere in any source material for the Nasuverse, but if you guys know, let me know, because I'm interested in that question now. A breadman, angered at the insults hurled towards its master, moved to attack, catching their breath. With no plan to speak of, and no route of escape, they had reached rock bottom. Meanwhile, the oddities were forming a circle around their prey, as if they smelled blood in the water. Were they to be dragged into a bakery for the oven? Minced in the meat grinder at the butcher shop? Oh, yeah, that's another thing that I failed to mention in the recap. A meat grinder has become sentient and is also trying to kill them. Details. Skewered and paraded around atop the carousel, walked the plank of the thorny pirate ship. After 2 years of slumber, they were eager to welcome their new guests.
一応聞いておきたいんだけど。
何？手短にね。今考え事してるから。
ああ、あの連中が何をしたいか嫌っていうほど伝わってくるんだけど。それってあの子
You know,
の趣味
Soujyuro asked some of the more interesting questions. He's got that fresh set of eyes.
その疑問はなかったの。連中の人間嫌いは遊園地の怨念とフラットスナークの性格じゃない。基本的にまともなやついないから。アリス
Big
が使う。
family freaks, huh?
あ、でも。
Aoko was unable to deny that there were some similarities.
それは結構。それで青崎の考え事って？
期待させて悪いけどお手上げ。ま、あんたが殺されれば止まるでしょうけど。
それは嫌だ。とりあえず逃げよう。
しずきくん？
No, whatever you say about Shizuki, there's one thing you absolutely can't. He is a man of decisive action when he needs to be. And he has decided to use the Joestar family's secret technique. Run away. She blinked in surprise at the sudden turn of events. Soujyuro, who had until now been meekly following her lead, had grabbed Aoko's hand and pulled her with him into a head-on charge at the swarm of bread in an attempt to break out of the encirclement. Got a jet.
意味わかんなすぎ。なんで今の流れでそうなるのよ、あんたは。
Aoko nonetheless followed Sojuro's uncharacteristically gung-ho lead, cursing him all the while. Alone, he had no chance of breaking through the surrounding wall of enemies with brute force. Aoko regained her bearings and let fly a spray of magic bullets ahead of Soujyuro. They burst through the net and ran as hard as they could. At this point, all that was left to do was what they had planned from the outset: get out of the park. But not before addressing what needed to be addressed.
なんでよ、さっきはあんなに諦めよかったのに。
Yeah, if you guys haven't been along with the whole journey, there was a bit back when it was just Aoko trying to kill Soujyuro, poor guy, where he had essentially just given up, and then he got a little bit of a spark back in him. Aoko could not begin to comprehend Sojuro's reaction.
ミラーハウスの時と今は違うだろう。いいから走れ。
This is this and that is that. Fair enough.
違わないわよ。あんたを殺そうとした私も、あんたを殺したいアリスも、理由の結果も同じよ、私たち。
Though she wondered what was getting her so worked up, Aoko did not stop. She told herself that the degree of Sojuro's stupidity charging the breadman so recklessly, had caused her to lose her cool.
あのね、一緒に逃げてるぐらいで勘違いしないでくれる？言っとくけど私、明日になったらまたあんたを殺しに。
それはまた今度の話だろう。大体青崎に殺されるのならいいけど、あの子に殺されるのは
A
嫌だ。
man of discerning tastes. He wants to determine who gets to kill him.
だからなんで？
Oh, I'm getting a little bit of buzz here, guys. Let me see if I can do a little bit of on the fly, jogging around with some things to see if I can make it a little bit better. Let's see. How's that? Alright, where's the buzzing coming from? Let's kill the window capture audio real quick. Let's do that. Because I don't know if the crackling is coming from... Yeah, it's coming from the window capture. Why is the window capture giving the crackling? Alright, let's turn that back on. Let's see if turning it off and back on again works. No, still got a little bit of buzz. Alright, next time we get to a stopping point, I'll see if I can do something about that. It was like someone had doused water over her blazing fury. Aoko's anger was snuffed out by the absurd simplicity of his reasoning. Could it be that Soujyuro did not mind being killed by someone as long as he had met them? Aoko grimaced as she followed him. The more things change, the more things stay the same. From her spot atop the clock tower, the girl observed the growth of her familiar, not absorbed. Flat Snark. A savior of the discarded. It was a vile, vulgar fairy tale monster who provided those abandoned by fate with a glimmer of hope before snatching it away. Alice had it under her control, but she was still keen to keep the Snark from expressing its bad habits. After completing a lap around the park that had now reached the size of an entire town, the robin made its sit rep. It seemed Aoko was prioritizing the safety of the boy. Even if it resulted in wasting an entire day, choosing not to capitulate on a decision was very much like her. I know she's a murderous lady who's stone cold, but Alice is very cute. Big fan. The bluebird cheeped in response. Was it denying its master's portrait of Aoko? Or agreeing that it was Aoko's style to do exactly that? An outsider might interpret its interjections either way. The robin jumped at being addressed so unexpectedly. It chirped and flapped its wings like a flustered servant, frantic to say otherwise. Her and Robin do have a little bit of a viperous relationship, don't they? Uh-oh. I mentioned before that Alice hadn't been involved at the start in the recap. Seems like she's gonna do something now. Calmly, she pulled out a small object from her pocket. It was a dark gray Easter egg, and emanating from inside it was the ticking of a clock. The robin knew it to be a ploy kickshaw with a bad attitude far exceeding Flat Snark's, known to be among the best in one-on-one situations.
控えめに壊れてきて
Something tells me the subtle way part of that sentence was more sarcastic than anything else. And together with the witch's breath, the egg filled with praise and disappeared. Suddenly, a strong wind swept through the park. The words, "I could have killed them all by myself," floated through the air. It was the disappointment of something enormous that was visible to all, yet overlooked. There you go, there's another hint for you guys. If you guys can figure out what the snark is taking as its form, I'll give you a pat on the back for a job well done. Aoko and Soujyuro continued their dash towards the boundary separating the park from outside. The curio horde that stood in their way had reduced in number. The iron fence that separated the two from the outside world was just over 300 yards away. Okay, if the wheel had stood in their way, that would have spelled the end. But thankfully, it had yet to reach its full strength. The only things that appeared before them were weak oddities that could easily be handled by Aoko's simple magecraft. She would have said, "Make it to the fence," if only her lungs would allow it. Since Aoko was utilizing the ample mana filling the park, her tank of magical energy was nearly full. Moreover, the condition of her body's circuits were steadily improving, to the extent that she would be able to unleash at least one all-out onslaught. Until something unusual was hovering above her field of vision. Doom Egg. It was locked on Soujyuro, hovering 10 feet above him, over to one side.
しずきくんちょっと
ああ、さっきからついてきてる。
Soujyuro had seemingly noticed it before Aoko, hence his previous awkward glances toward the sky. In truth, it would have been stranger for him not to notice, as the thing was practically glued to him. Especially as, if you guys remember, he is very much the outdoorsy type, so his level of perception around him is far beyond the normal person, so it would be very strange for him not to notice. In terms of its size, the floating object measured about 3 feet in diameter, so fairly large. Tiles covered its exterior, about which a multitude of spinning lights danced about.
卵かな。
Soujyuro asked, not really sure what to call it.
卵って言ったらわ
Her bullets bounced off like it was made of rubber. That trait, the ability to deflect all outside interference, confirmed to Aoko that this thing was undoubtedly a ploy kickshaw, which is what Alice's summons are called. Those are the kickshaws.
やっぱり外からのルールじゃ壊れないかしずきくんあれから絶対に目をそらさないでいい何があっても見続けること視界の隅に入れとくだけでいいから
ああ。
Aoko picked up her pace as she barked orders. The Eggman who sat on a wall. He would crack, just as the tale spoke of. Nothing anyone could do or say would cause him to fall, but the moment they stopped looking, he would tumble down and break into pieces.
いわく王様の軍隊でも元に戻せない数の破片
Ooh, little typo. Little typo. That should be couldn't put him back together again. It was the Mother Goose poem, Humpty Dumpty. If Soujyuro was its target, then the moment he averted his gaze, it would tumble and explode. Go-Go Gadget IED. Either way, it was going to scatter something troublesome when it fell. Its oval shape, the keyhole adorning the front, and writing inscribed upon it, they all made her anxious. If it was an egg, that meant it was going to hatch at some point. Even if he continued his stare, once the time came for whatever was inside to come out, they would have even less ability to conserve their energy.
青崎、早すぎないか。あまり全力で走ると。
後のことは考えないでいいからしずきくんは卵だけに集中して
At this critical juncture, breadmen stepped out to join the egg and block their path. Fortunately, we have a very angry redhead, or I guess she's got brown hair at this point, to mow them all down. The breadmen were marching forth in a grand battalion. At her level of firepower, Aoko should have easily mowed them down. However, they've gotten an upgrade. Throwing a little bit of extra oomph to it. If Snap failed to do the job, that meant it was time for her to put her crest to use. Draw. A formula-triggered bullet encased in a full wind jacket. If her previous shots were the equivalent of a machine gun volley, then this was her artillery shot. Yeah, I like this one better. The hard crust bread that had absorbed her snap without a dent scattered into thousands of tiny pieces at her draw's torrent. Now that's a proper laser. Of course, the destruction did not end with just the breadmen. What had once been a brick road was now thoroughly stripped of its pavement. The nearby stalls had been warped into twisted steel skeletons. It was a spectacle that made Soujyuro question what the greater obstacle to their escape was. The wall of breadmen, or Aoko's ability to lay waste to things. Get closer, she yells. I'm sure he feels very comfortable. Look at that. Look at that face. Look. Soujyuro is not too happy about his company right now. Oh dear. This made a lot of sense to Soujyuro. He had not fully appreciated the part about hostages, but he got the gist of it. Offended though she was by his typically naive response, she could not help but be impressed. Soujyuro was a straight arrow through and through. His eyes stayed firmly focused on the egg overhead, even amidst the chaos of the melee unfolding before him. A halfway compliment from the Ice Queen herself? Though she was joking, her eyes were dead serious. Soujyuro shuddered at the thought of the situation growing even more dire. Soujyuro shook his head, a look of complete aversion on his face. I don't blame him. Even if I could 1v1 throw hands with one of the breadmen, it would be freaky, man. It'd be like throwing hands with a moving mannequin, but it's also edible. I don't know, would that make it easier? Just eat it, I suppose. Although there's some weird implications about that, too. Ugh. Let's move on from that. Aoko took a quick, deep breath, and then began to sprint once again. Far in the distance, through the fog, the iron fence waited, 300 paces away. As long as nothing happened, they would make it there in one piece. Soujyuro followed after Aoko, holding on to that all-too-convenient hope. But hope was something ever fleeting. In fact, it lasted not even 300 yards. The edge of the amusement park may well have been the edge of the world. Oh, got eyes on the city now. That's a plus at least. But there's the fence, and another, and another, and another, and another, and another, and another, and a million other fences. That can't be good. Dozens of undulating horizons could be seen, crowding the sky like a giant cloud or a thick curtain, or perhaps groaning lips. It was the end of the road, the outer limit of an outrageous and fantastical realm. Now, if you guys remember, we mentioned the bounded field. This is the outer side of the bounded field. This is the edge. This is the limit. This is the actual boundary itself, keeping all the fantastical, outrageous stuff inside, away from the normal reality outside in the town. And yet, Aoko found it to be much like the last page of an enormous picture book. The sight turned her mind blank. Well, this is about as bad as it gets, she thought. The snark, this island of despair, had, at last, brought Aoko to her knees as she stared at the swelling border. The park indeed had an end. Even now, as Aoko and Soujyuro had expected, a fence divided the amusement park from the residential area neighboring it. It had both doubled in height and been made sturdier, another hurdle she had foreseen before even laying eyes on it. Expecting it to have been snarkified, Aoko had come prepared to demolish an obstacle or two, but this construction before her went beyond a mere wall. It was an ocean that separated the underworld from the mortal one. The iron fence was like a restless, surging sea. 1 or 2 walls could easily be toppled, that wasn't an issue. Even 10 or 20 could be dealt with one way or another. Between the power left in her body and that which filled the park, putting on a brave front was within her power. She could fully mobilize her circuits and her crest to the point of burnout in a last-ditch effort, like some reenactment of the parting of the Red Sea. Which Red Sea was mentioned, the parting of the Red Sea. So never forget that Moses canonically used a Beyblade to part the Red Sea in the Beyblade universe. You're welcome. Even if a path could be opened, she would not have the energy left to walk it. And it was obvious what would become of her afterward. The residents would hardly forgive her for wreaking such havoc around their park. Like ants drawn to honey, they would swarm the helpless girl and tear her to pieces. Despondent and exhausted, she felt the sting of remorse. Escaping the park, looking back on how they had gotten here, Aoko recognized that her choices had been her undoing. A very Aoko thing to happen. Under the golden full moon, beams of steel bent and merged like wireframe sculptures. It was only a matter of time before the amusement park itself became one colossal monster. The horde of familiars gathered in the plaza where Alice was had formed an impenetrable blockade around her. Just above the head of the boy beside her, the whispering egg, called Scratch Dumpty, continued to shuffle what appeared on its surface.
Aozaki.
Shizuki-kun.
The boy's voice snapped Aoko out of her trance, if only for a moment. The stark reality of the situation quickly dawned on the novice mage, the sheer hopelessness of it all, as it ripped out and snatched away any will she had to resist.
ゲートに行こう。ここはどうしようもないけど、入り口ならもうちょっとマシだろ。
Soujyuro doesn't seem to have lost hope,
フラットス
or
ナー
at
ク
the very least, he's ready to keep
こ
going.
いつにもルールがあるって言ったじゃないか。なら、これは役割の問題だ。初めから鉄柵は通れない壁だけど、ゲートなら出入り口として機能しているかもしれない。
See, this is one thing I do really appreciate about Soujyuro. Even though he's very odd and out there as a guy, he can understand and very quickly think through solutions. And even if someone else might give up at that point, he's going to continue and think and mull over what the conditions and rules and governing qualities of a situation are and try and work out the best solution, or at least another solution. That's something I really appreciate it, because it's not just the classic anime pro tag of power of friendship, or I'm just gonna throw myself at it and it'll magically work out because I have plot armor type deal, right? Soujyuro had not given in to panic. Aoko found herself honestly admiring Sojuro's ability to analyze Snark's characteristics, given the circumstances. Now calm, she steeled her resolve.
そうね、確かに門はあると思う。けどたどり着くのは難しいわ。一番弱かった焼きたてパンですら今はもうあれだもん。広場や入り口にはもっと上等なのがたむろしてるだろうし、門だってあの観覧車以上の怪物かもしれない。確か大きなキッツィちゃんだったでしょ。
Yeah, I did forget that pretty much everything in this park was a design nightmare. So yeah, that gate probably is a monster as well.
青崎はゲートには行かないのか。
まあね。それよりこっちの方が現実的だし。
Aoko took another glance at the undulating iron fences. It was too late to achieve their goal of making it out alive. In that case, she decided to prioritize the other promise she had made.
今からこの鉄柵を壊すから、あなたはそこから外に出て。
And this is something I bragged on Soujyuro, so I'm going to brag on Aoko here. For all her flaws, and she has many, she is a woman of her word. If she says she's going to do something, she is going to freaking do it, man. She is going to make it happen or die trying. And I think that's a very admirable quality.
それで私の役割はおしまいよ。
Though her words were few, her tone told the whole story. She was telling him to escape by himself.
信じられない。こんなの青崎だけじゃ壊せないだろ。
私だけならね。でも今はこの遊園地が味方してる。燃料がこれだけあるんだから。ま、それでも1回が限度だから、穴を開けたらあんたには全力で走り抜けてもらうしかないけど。
She would carve a path through this iron sea of fences, gambling on one final effort, a great incantation to launch the biggest projectile she could manage. As an outsider, Soujyuro could not even begin to imagine just how much of a burden this would be for her. All he could imagine was a hazy vision of Aoko being left behind in this park. What would happen to her? Would that girl in black come to save her? Cruel as it were to imagine, he knew she would not. After Aoko had exhausted her very best in order to save him, that girl would not stay her hand. The only way Alice would let Aoko off the hook was if Aoko killed Soujyuro as payment. And so...
20メートルぐらい離れてて、準備に手間取るけど、その卵の表面が茹で上がるまでには終わらせるから。
It went without saying that this was the only path.
待ってくれ。俺を逃がすって言うけど、それに意味はあるのか、青崎。
ないけど、外に出られたところでアリスから逃げ切れるとは思えないし。けど、これぐらいは最後の意地よ。守るって言ったんだから、できるところまでやらないと。
Surprised by her seemingly moral stance, Soujyuro saw Aoko in a new light. But of course. Soujyuro realized she was not fighting for his sake, but for the sake of her pride.
そうだったな。けど、それなら俺だけ逃がすのはらしくないぞ。
何よ。いいから離れてて。
Aoko eased off, just a bit. She recalled how, an hour ago, he had gotten the better of her.
青崎、まだ意地を張れるんなら他のことをやろう。 このお化けみたいな鉄柵を壊せるなら他に壊すべきものがあるはずだ。
ないわよ。悪いけど私は目に見えるものしか壊せないの。最後まで形のない希望にすがるとか考えるのも寒気がする。いい？今はフラットスナークなんかよりこの壁を壊してあんたを足抜けさせるのが私の現実。私に負える最大限の責任って。
逃げるのか。
Oh. Oh, that sounds like fighting words to me. Get her. Get her, Soujyuro. Aoko was just about to turn her back on him when Soujyuro clutched her hand. His words caused something inside of her to boil with rage. It was as though someone had set her heart on fire. The surprise that pricked open her true feelings and the disappointment she felt toward herself thawed her frozen limbs.
誰が逃げるのはそっちで逃がしてあげるのはこっちだって言うのよ。甘く見ないで。いざと。
そうか。ならここで俺を逃がすのは無駄だな。その気迫は本命のために取っておこう。それまでは俺も手伝うから。
I love these two idiots.
それこそ無駄な気遣いよ。頭きた。いいから逃げろバカ。だいたい走り詰めで息も怠大なやつなんか使えないわよ。
そりゃいい加減ヘトヘトだけど、そういう青崎なんか疲れ以上に傷の方が痛んでるだろ。
Not to mention the injury to her back that Aoko had nearly forgotten about. Even now, she couldn't ignore the pain that the automaton had inflicted on her spine. Yeah, that automaton did do a little bit of a bane on her. Smacked her pretty good. With iron will, she'd managed to push it out of her mind. Mostly.
ほら、魔術とか抜きにすればまだ俺の方がマシじゃないか。で
きないことは口にしないで。もういいから言って。慣れているもの、私は。でも、だからいいの。
The fact that they were a team. The fact that she would still have to kill him after all of this. None of the irony was lost on her as she said these words. It didn't matter anymore. Still, Soujyuro didn't let go of her hand. He gripped it even harder. His expression was the same as ever. Aoko frowned, trying to figure out if he was upset with her.
確かにこういうのは初めてだ。けど山じゃ危険な目ぐらい合ってる。鹿に襲われたことだってあるんだぞ、俺は。
You know, I'm sure, I don't remember exactly the dialogue, but I'm sure Aoko is going to react like most people would if you're not an outdoorsy sort and have been around wild deer hunting, especially if you hunt on foot as opposed to tree stands. Being attacked by a deer sounds very lame unless you've been out there in the woods. As a city girl, she had no idea what it meant to be attacked by a deer, but his determination was apparent enough. True. Looking back on it now, he had maintained his composure through it all. A normal person would barely be able to talk through such panic. But perhaps growing up deep in the mountains, far from civilization, had taught him how to stay calm in the face of so much.
だから信じてくれ。少しでいいから。
He spoke his plain, unadulterated feelings, and released his hand. There was no lie in him. In fact, he was too honest, so much that she found it hard to believe him. Soujyuro had no reason to go that far. As it stood, Aoko had no future. After confessing this and telling him to escape, why did this boy still offer to help a person like her?
わからない。どうしてそこまでするの？私に付き合えばあなたは死ぬのよ。これが最後だからちゃんと考えてよね。あなたはここで逃げるべきよ。
それはわかるよ。でも行かない。
Now kiss. Soujyuro answered immediately, realizing that Aoko was looking for his reason. This level of insight in Soujyuro demanded a round of applause. Give it up for him, everybody.
そうすると青 崎が死んでしまいそうだ。
His words were as irrational as always.
だからどうしてそこまでするのよあんたは。
She was yelling out of frustration. After thinking for a moment, Soujyuro replied,
君が好きだからだな。
simple and to the point. His face seemed to ask why she would even question him so. There was a pause, no more than 2 seconds. His surprise attack had stopped Aoko in her tracks. Alice was not the only one who had an ace up her sleeve. That line reached deeper even than Flat Snark could ever hope to. All Aoko could respond with was an expression of pure shock. It was a simple, stubborn reason, the strongest kind on earth. Soujyuro Shizuki was indeed incomprehensible. To be able to work unconditionally with someone who was trying to kill him. But she felt as though she'd finally grasped a sliver of his true nature. Tobimaru and the others' assessment of him was correct, as vexing as it was for her to admit.
バカね。私はあなたのこと嫌いなのに。
He laughed at her sour grumble. At this point, he was used to her insults. Their clash of wills ended here. Aoko's blood ran hot from her blazing heart. If he was going to make a face like that, all she could do was try to think of a way to get them both home.
私だって逃げっぱなしは性に合わないし。いいわよ。最後まで粘ってみる。それにしずきくんが付き合ってくれるなら何かの役には立つでしょ。
Though her tone had lightened, there was still hesitation in her eyes. It was only natural. Aoko had not even a clue as to how to begin to fight the Snark. If only she'd just been a bit more skilled, or had trained just a bit more, there might have been some way to look for it.
我ながら情けない。せめて正体を暴く手がかりでもあれば。
Alright. This is your last chance, guys. Put in your bets now. What form has the Snark taken? You've had hints, you've had chances to guess, and I will even give you this one last major hint. We have seen it already. It has been on screen already. I'll give you guys a few seconds here if you want to make a bet. Alright, 10 more seconds to place your bets if you want to. Alright, time's up. Unconsciously, she let her apprehension show. Sniveling was pointless. She would just have to figure it out by herself, but...
なんだ、正体さえ分かればいいのか?
Aoko gave him a look, as if to ask what that was supposed to mean.
いや、だからおかしなものはどれかってことだろ?
Soujyuro also made a face that suggested she should have brought it up sooner.
わかるのあんた。
多分、いや、結構前から気になっていたんだけど。
Soujyuro whispered in her ear quietly, so as not to be overheard. Ah. It was certainly unexpected. But then again, equally obvious. After he explained the mistake, she knew right away that he was correct. At last, she had an inkling of Flat Snark's original form, namely... They strategized for 10 minutes. After deliberating the Snark's true form and figuring out a plan of attack, the two exchanged nods in acceptance of their roles.
それじゃあここからは別行動ね。でもミラーハウスの時みたいなのは勘弁してよ。この作戦の肝はあなたなんだから。開始1分でドジったら 本当に打つ手なしだからね。
Though she jabbed him for his previous failure as a decoy, her voice was bright. Aoko's original vigor had returned to her at Sojuro's discovery of the truth. Meanwhile, Soujyuro was also getting serious in his own way. He took Aoko's warning to heart.
ならいいけど、いい？さっきと立場は反対よ。失敗したら死ぬのは私じゃなくてそっち。もうフォローに回れないから、できるだけ慎重にね。
分かってる。今更ながらやっぱりさっき逃がしてもらえばよかったと思うぐらい。
Soujyuro nodded, telling her to leave it to him. Though he made it sound like he was holding a grudge, it seemed to be the only way of showing her his resolve. Aoko let out a sigh of defeat. Once more, she couldn't figure him out.
ほんと、大バカなんだか大物なんだか。でも任せた。期待してるわ、しずきくん。
She had wanted to say that she believed in him, but apparently that was too embarrassing for her. Aoko turned away from Soujyuro and began to run. She had begun to think that maybe this change of pace was not so bad after all. And so ended the intermission. The young cast members were handed their new lines. Whatever happened next, the Night of Witches had, at long last, entered its climax. Uh-oh, Alice seems perturbed at this. She was filled with foreboding at the Robin's report. Apparently, they had gone in opposite directions. The park's residents had set off after the boy witness, and it would take them mere minutes to capture him, so the bird said.
どういうこと？追いかけているのは本当に彼？青子が変装しているのではなく。
The robin flapped its wings, chirping away any doubt. It had seen them with its own two eyes. Aoko was heading for the plaza, while the cocky brat was making a run for the roller coaster.
青子が彼を見捨てたですって。そんな簡単なことならいいけど。ダンプティは彼に張り付いているの？
The robin nodded enthusiastically. It didn't know about the other birds, but with its superior night vision, it had seen that sucker clearly, because he had moved to the high spot.
ダンプティはなんて？最後まで歌わせろ。こんな褒め殺したい間抜けはまたとない。ですって。
Scratch Dumpty was a ticking time bomb that would drop and detonate the moment its target averted its gaze. That is, as long as his target continued to observe him. In a way, he was a gentlemanly ploy kickshaw, though Alice wished he would forego such niceties when in battle.
そうね。視線を切らないだけではダンプティからは逃げられない。表面の詩が完成すれば扉が開く。
This is another thing I really like about Alice's magecraft, is that all of her ploy kickshaws, her summons, have their own personalities and quirks to them. I really like the idea of her having this, kind of like Aoko said, her messed up, weird, freaky family around her of magical disasters, for lack of a better term. All of her different summons having different quirks and them interacting.
彼がどこまで逃げようと、あと少しでダンプティがしまってくれるわ。
Until the park, or rather the Snark, was destroyed, Soujyuro would not be able to escape. Which meant the larger concern was Aoko. Aoko had promised to protect the boy, which begged the question, where was she running to?
ここにいる限り、青子の動向はつかめない。
Alice looked out over the park, ignoring the robin's attempt to get her attention with its plumage. Flat Snark had nearly reached its full size. It was a different breed of beast compared to the other cheap ploys. To her, it was one of her 3 most irreplaceable and precious familiars.
そうね。任せたわスナーク。青子が諦めない以上、あなたも手は抜かないで。
Alice remained where she was. With the same historical merit as the troll under the bridge and the poison-clawed reptile, Flat Snark was one of Alice's ultimate ploys. She was placing her trust in his reputation and ability.
でも忘れないで。これはゲームよ。勝敗がついたのなら、私のところに帰ってきて。
Silence. The drifting fog ignored its master's words. It was the one thing that Alice had misread. Flat Snark was a king, even among the other ploys, of terrible, vulgar antics. Death to the defeated, gruesome tragedy to the vanquished. It found no pleasure unless it brought about dramatic ruination of life and wealth. The fog billowed like wicked laughter. After all, only a king had the right to decide the fate of the vanquished, and the Snark's greed could not be contained. Thus, it hadn't even the slightest intent to play fair, despite its master's orders. Oh, Sojuro's going vertical, it seems. Over 100 feet high. That's freaking high. One careful step at a time, the figure made its way gingerly up the track, which stretched into the heart of the amusement park. He stayed his beating chest and the pounding of his breath. Even tiny movements were an obstacle to his progress. Jump by Van Halen plays in the background. Amazingly, the one making this pale-faced advance higher and higher was Soujyuro Shizuki. Far below, he saw that a horde of bread creatures had congregated by the roller coaster platform. As they bustled this way and that, their numbers continued to increase by the minute, seemingly cheering on Soujyuro with raised arms as he made his ascent. Isn't that nice? Or rather, they jeered as if beckoning him to come down. A little bit less nice. Of course, neither did Soujyuro, nor I, but his current state was the lesser of 2 evils. Also, I just want to put it out there and make this on record. I don't have a problem with heights, or of being up high, or of falling. The problem that I have is when the earth catches me. That's the part that's concerning to me. The only thing that followed him now was the floating egg. After heaving a huge sigh, Soujyuro bent forward a bit and climbed the track that inclined towards the heavens. 150 feet now. If this were a skyscraper, he would be on the 16th floor. A strong gust of wind whipped through his hair. Humans had an instinctual fear of heights. In particular, a place like this, which called forth visions of falling to one's death, would cause a person's knees to tremble against their will. It was an instinct that forewarned death, urging its master to return to the safety of the ground. It was a reasonable reaction. Climbing the roller coaster tracks went beyond funny stories and into the realm of fantasy. The strong winds and change in air pressure were a hindrance. His instincts screamed at him to stop, causing his limbs to go numb, his muscles to go limp, and his mind to race. Even if he had been tied to a lifeline, a mere 15 feet of climbing would still have caused his thoughts to freeze out of sheer terror. And it would only get worse from here, exponentially so. Every foot forward increased the load on both his mind and his body by another degree. The burden on his mind notwithstanding, he carefully measured the toll on his body with every step. His legs, which had carried him running this far, threatened to buckle the moment he let down his guard. This fatigue was likely why Aoko had stressed that Sojuro's role was more dangerous than hers. Soujyuro laughed as he stared at the floating egg. He reflected on the course of events that had led to this absurd situation. Not even 10 minutes ago, they had been engaged in a conversation.
じゃあ次ね。正体が分かった以上、あとはどう壊すかを話し合いましょう。
Soujyuro felt a shudder travel down his spine at Aoko's smug grin. In hindsight, Aoko had been more than happy at this point to make him do something absurd. And everybody remember, if Aoko's in a good mood about something, if she's got a grin on her face, something's probably gonna blow up.
どう壊すかってそれなら
Soujyuro wondered aloud. From what he'd seen, Aoko had enough firepower to tear clean through the fence. He had refrained from speculating about Flat Snark's true form because he'd felt there was nothing they could do about it, even if they knew. But that had changed. For Aoko, the impossible was quite literally within her grasp.
そうでもないわ。私の目算だと、あと50メートル分、ギリギリで届かない。
Despair filled Sojuro's eyes. Aoko lifted a hand to her long hair and, with a magically charged fingertip, there we go, clipped a clean tuft of it.
足りない分は努力と根性ってね。あなたはできるだけ高いところまで逃げて。頃合いを見て合図を出すから。そうしたらこれを空に放ってくれる？
But based on where Aoko pointed her gaze, she did not really mean to leave it up to Soujyuro to pick the highest place he could find. She was staring conspicuously at one of the amusement park's two main attractions, the roller coaster.
つまり青崎とは別行動をとってあの怪物たちに追われながら高いところに逃げ込めと。
そういうこと。
Oh, that's a dangerous expression. That is a dangerous Aoko expression if I've seen one. There were two demons in this park. Her smile made even Soujyuro want to respond that it was far from perfect.
疑いたくはないんだが本当はあの子とグルで俺を遠回しに殺そうとしてるんじゃないか。
あら、私に殺されるのならいいんでしょ？
人の出現を悪用するのは良くないと思う。
Soujyuro hung his head. This was not sane. If he did as she said, he would die from exhaustion before Kitsy even had a chance to eat him.
私だって鬼じゃないわ。
Oni janai
こっち
wa.
向いて。おまじないかけてあげる。
Oh, little magic. Little magic from Miss Aoko. Cheer him up, keep him going. It was the lightest of touches. Close enough for their breath and skin to come into contact. He finished with a hushed voice. For one of them, this was a rather mundane magecraft. For the other, it was a head-spinning, intimate ambush.
軽く、弱く、うまく、早く。チクタクチクタク、急げや急げ。
Words that could not be produced by a normal larynx, carrying a peculiar weight to them, reverberated against his eardrums. If words were given colors, these would have been the color of her name, blue. Sojuro's exhausted body and burning blood gently cooled.
飛ぶ、泳ぐ、駆け抜ける。チクタクチクタク、汽笛を鳴らせ。星はいつでも北の空。どこまで。
In reality, it took but a few seconds, but the sudden contact had felt a little longer.
よし、暗示成功。成功したはず。ここまで手応えがあったの初めてだし。アリスの小言もたまには役に立つじゃない。
A very merry Aoko stood aside a very confused Soujyuro. After he asked what the heck had occurred, she responded,
簡単な暗示よ。一時的に恐怖心を消しておいたから高いところに登っても平気なはず。あの手の作業で一番足を引っ張るのは同様でしょ。恐怖も何も感じなければ地上何メートルだろうと平均台とそう変わらないってわけ。
He seemed to get it. It actually all sounded like Greek to Soujyuro, but he accepted it as an explanation for her strange actions. He'd arrived at the summit of the track. From nearly 200 feet high, Soujyuro had a bird's eye view of the entire amusement park. And I think that, because I have read this, we're going to take a quick pause, because I can't remember if there's a chapter pause here before the next section. So give me just a minute here, guys, to use the restroom and get some more tea, because I also had tea over here. Maybe grab... Yeah, no, I'm just going to get some more tea. So I'll be back in just a couple minutes at most, because I do not want to interrupt the next segment. Give me just 1 minute here, and I will be right back. Alrighty, folks. I have returned. Thank you very much for your patience as I took a little bit of a break there. I hope you guys, if you have needed to grab something, a little drink, a little snack, anything of the sort, hope you guys did, and you have returned to join me again. Alright, so let's continue as things are about to pop off. He was able to spot Aoko's figure right away. In the plaza not so far from here, she seemed to be occupied with something conspicuous. Her surroundings lay still. The breadmen were still busy trying to figure out how to reach Soujyuro by trial and error from the roller coaster's entrance. They were over 300 feet away now. The strong winter gales had dried the sweat on his brow, but he was drenched underneath his shirt. This sweat was worth at least a half-mile run, not to mention all the scares he had experienced throughout the night. He felt a wave of relief, but not at the thought of Aoko destroying the snark in this nightmarish park. He was simply happy that he could repay a bit of his debt from the House of Mirrors. A blue bullet rose from the plaza where Aoko was located. There it is. Soujyuro stood atop the tracks, pulled out the pouch he had stowed in his pocket, and tossed it forward. Without any regard for his questionable footing, he gave it a mighty overarm pitch. The small pouch drew a parabolic curve in Aoko's direction, quickly becoming untied in midair. Inside the bag was the lock for a hair and a small stone weight.
高いところから風に乗せてくれれば、あとは何とかするから。
Aoko had said, but it was Sojuro's effort that had set the plan in motion. The tuft of hair remained airborne, drifting as if watching over its owner. Sojuro's job was done. He remained concerned about the egg hovering over him. There's nothing he could do about it anyway. Soujyuro breathed a sigh of relief and leaned forward to watch the rest of the plan unfold, but then, in the corner of his eye, he thought he saw
Route set.
Oh, she's gonna do something big.
1層、2層、予備に3層。魔力提供、体現に固定。循環よし、射角よし、術式安定。
A pattern began to carve itself into the brick street. The casting of an unprecedented incantation with unprecedented range. Keeping the rising tension contained within her chest, the fledgling mage snapped her fingers.
ツアープラン、スターマイン。
She kneeled at the center of the formula and raised her head to the night sky. Not even a glimpse of the transmogrified fantasy land around her entered her vision now. Only one thing, only one untouchable thing was reflected in her blue eyes.
実はずっと気になっていたことが。
This is how their conversation started a few minutes prior. Soujyuro began with a simple statement of fact. In truth, it was really the simplest of discrepancies. Any difference between the reality of an hour ago and the illusion of the present was both infinitesimally small and infinite.
雲があったから勘違いしたんだろうけど。
It was hiding in plain sight. Too impossible to be real. Too outlandish to be here. In this amusement park where every paradigm had shifted, something was brazenly flaunting its normalcy.
今夜は新月なんだ、青崎。
And there we have it.
思えば、初めっからその形だったものね、あんたは。
Anybody who placed their bet that it was actually the moon that Flat Snark was hiding as, you get a pat on the back for a job well done. The distance from the Earth to the moon was 238,900 miles. If it truly was identical to the actual moon, then this monster indeed lived up to its eerie reputation. At a distance that vast, there would have been no need to hide. It could flaunt its true form for all to see. But if it had to hide its true form, that meant it was vulnerable. The monster's camouflage implied that it sat within the reach of a human's hands.
こっちの最大射程はよくて600ってところだけど。
At this point, it was time to give it all she had. Drawing on the energy surging throughout the park, she extended her firing arm. A blue firework launched into the air. Looking up at her hair dancing in the wind above, Aoko reached out her right hand as if to catch the night sky. A mage's own body made for the perfect catalyst. And for a female mage, the hair she has grown out over many years made for a particularly valuable and powerful source of fuel. To use it, all she had to do was apply her will. She locked the fingers on both her hands together and shouted,
三層展開、全術式、連結起動。
she hurled forth a clear challenge to bind the moon to herself. The mist began to whirl about in a vortex. The monster high above bore its fangs at the sight of the blue spell that appeared in midair. By the time Alice had noticed the change, the hostility between Aoko and the snark was palpable. The fog continued to thicken with no mage, as if the Lord of the Night would bow down to such impudence. There was no staying its wrath at a challenge so flagrant. The robin swooped in to give its report, but Alice waved it away. Her gaze was fixed on the transforming golden moon. Snargus had his fill too. Her calls of restraint did not reach it. This fairy tale monster was beholden to nobody, and it would have no qualms unleashing its vast might upon its puny prey. The core of her magic bullet howled. The magic circuits within her body spun. Aoko fed the magical energy, scorching her nerves with imaginary flame. She was linked to the formula inscribed on the ground. The spell was read and executed the same as it always was, but its output was beyond reckoning. With this much firepower, even this mundane process would invite injury upon its caster. It was enough to burn up the nerves that were acting as the barrel. The imaginary heat had reached a terrifying temperature. Aoko trembled at this endless feeling, but would have to grin and bear it unless their efforts come to naught. Aoko could no longer move. When she had learned the snark's true form from Soujyuro, she gave up on any superiority a movable turret offered, instead opting to become a stationary cannon. When in doubt, turn yourself into a gun. If that doesn't work, turn yourself into a bigger gun. That was the only way she could reach it. It was impossible to hunt the snark unless she anchored her crest at this location and angle. At the same time, this action revealed that she was out of options. Once the fuse was lit, she would have no choice but to fight to the bitter end. Aoko took a deep breath. This was the way she wanted it. Her preparations were complete. She would be able to deliver this maelstrom of magical energy directly to the moon, like a rocket payload. The third mid-air layer served as the cannon's muzzle and sight. It would fire the magical energy once it reached criticality, and it allowed Aoko to adjust the angle of fire. The moon became warped within her scope. Snark isn't gonna make it that easy. As Aoko charged her magical energy, the ploy displayed its golden form, as if to mock her. Come, worship the heavens, powerless scion of an innocent bloodline. For there it was, a point among the otherworldly sky, a mystical visage obfuscated by jade mists and azure clouds. Called the greatest treasure known to the world of magecraft, a rarity more valuable than an entire kingdom, Crown Phantasm. Set apart from the first, the world's greatest fabrication. Her instincts screamed at her to delay no further. This fairy tale monster was the greatest of its kind, and it was about to expose its true form. Its open hostility made it clear that it was ready to counterattack. She had to shoot it down first. Magical energy was at 80%. The formula was operating normally. All that was left was to pull the trigger, but The calm voice inside her head asked if that was really okay. She had one shot at this. There was no going back. It was a battle of precision with no room for miscalculations. Even a tenth of a second of hesitation would tip the scales. Was she ready for the pain? Was she ready to deal with the fallout if she missed? Could she really even take down the moon with such a tiny bullet in the first place?
いい。とりあえず当たった後で考える。
Her eyes, fixed upon the moon, were filled with determination. She knew that the moment she fired, the intentional recoil would overwhelm her entire body. Still, she shouted.
上等。足惜しみはなし。目いっぱいぶん回すわ。
With every ounce of spirit she possessed, she fired her ultra-long-range projectile into the sky. The third layer embraced the magic bullet fired from the surface of the earth. The crest, an extension of Aoko's self, unleashed light to pierce the moon. However, an enormous blue canopy pulverized the beam. It returned the ether, that 3,000-degree flame, to nothing as it came into contact with the bullet. The recoil of the Grand Magecraft literally boiled her blood. Her body couldn't handle it. Her heart stopped. Her brain went numb from the pain and impact. Her nerves putrefied from end to end. But her magic crest revived them all by force. Even though her vision had gone white, she could still see it. Swallowing the blood in her mouth, Aoko looked up with a scowl. There it was, an enormous shield of ice and a sneering, deformed skull. There was no time to think or hesitate. The magical energy throughout the park began to gather. Aoko knelt. Across from the tyrannical face of the moon, she intuited that the ice had yet to fully form. Flatsnark still hadn't reached its full strength, which was exactly why. By accelerating the spell, Aoko damaged her own body. The burden of linking the formula to the snark caused intense pain. All she could do was grit her teeth and endure it. All because Aoko had gotten a read on their relative strengths. Even if its volume of magical energy was identical, Snark's form, its mystic scale, was in a different league. Aoko could charge her energy to her absolute limit, and that would barely make a dent in the ice wall. Meanwhile, there was nothing she could do to prevent her own annihilation if the Snark gathered as much energy as it could. She loaded her next shot. She issued orders to the floating third layer. Ignoring the toll on her body, she began to accelerate the first layer formula. The role of her right hand's single layer was to absorb and store surrounding magical energy. The thick fog that drifted throughout the park was an ancient ether, spewed out by Flatsnark's own body, but Aoko could pour it into her formula. Aoko's body, which had integrated with the formula, took on an amount of magical energy that far surpassed its maximum capacity. It seethed in agony. Or rather, it trembled in delight. For a mage, magical energy was propellant to reach the realm of mystics. The expansion of internal time, the liquefaction of the self, the release from the physical. They were all what one might call a near-death experience. On the precipice of what lay beyond, Aoko stood firm and faced reality. Still, reality had come to break her will. The gap between them was plain to any observer. The gun barrel named Aoko Aozaki had not a chance to chip away at that lump of ice. She's gonna have to go at once. She accelerated the spell further. The skull grinned. That ice was no shield. It was a hammer to crush mages who did not know their place. The moon laughed as it prepared to crush not just Aoko, but the boy atop the roller coaster, as well as the park in its entirety. Her circuits were on the verge of going critical. Her body had been charged with a scorching power supply from her fingertips to her eyeballs. She would see the bullet fired. She would arrange the Magecraft formula as quickly as her nerve's transmission speed would allow. A single attack was not enough. There was no way to shoot it from its flank, which meant there was only one solution. The third layer began to transform. It switched from direct to alternating current. The spell's supposed strong point was its ability to adjust its trajectory mid-flight, but right now all she wanted was numbers. Here we go again. A blue sun shined down upon the amusement park. Beams of light at maximum output streaked forth to pierce the golden moon. Holding down the trigger, she continued to fire, taking in energy ad infinitum. Blue flames shot forth at critical level, but the ice would neither melt nor mar. No amount of sheer heat could make a dent in something formed from such a colossal amount of magical energy. The toll on her circuits sent them berserk, and blood began to run free. The battle had become a tussle over the magical energy that filled the park. From the very beginning, this had been the Snark's home turf. The Snark had control over at least 80% of the space, while Aoko had 20 at best. The castle of ice descended as if to call the match. All she could do was delay the inevitable. She knew that she had been backed into a wall, and right now, the only thing she could do was to keep firing. Then again, perhaps not. There was another option. If she converted all of her magical energy into a defense, there was a tiny chance, no, not even tiny, a great possibility, in fact, that she could save just her. Clinging to that broken hope, Aoko continued to rotate her circuits. Time seemed to stop at the magical energy overdose. A second of intense pain lasted an eternity. Then, amidst everything, something approached one step at a time. Something from among the park's shadows. Something. She felt goosebumps from head to toe. The issue was no longer the ice overhead. In the midst of this stillness, the Red Death drew closer, step by ominous step.
なんでこんなところで
Her circuits in her mind began to rupture out of terror. The composition of her formula and soul began to rip apart. There it was, just behind her. Its footsteps came to a halt. It reached around and cupped her face in its blood-stained hands.
こんにちは
Greetings. She wanted to scream out with all her might. This is it. Nothing matters. I couldn't care less. Run or don't run. It doesn't matter. Quit hiding and reveal yourself. Use whatever you can and show no mercy. That was it. She had one final card to play. Once, a miracle had been gifted to her, almost as a joke. It made the ice look like child's play. That was what the Red Death had come to kill. Using it would spell ruin. Not using it would mean death by ice. Then why hesitate? There was no conditions on its use. There was no price to pay for its power. She simply would cease to be herself. That was all. Humans love to exist in areas of gray. Dozens of electrical impulses disconnect in the brain every minute. Nothing lasts forever, not even oneself. It was not anything particularly worth of disdain. It was not even anything remarkably worthy of being called taboo. What escaped her lips now was rage, bewilderment from the red silhouette. The girl let out an inaudible scream. Could true magic truly be her savior? What an opportunistic load of bull. After all, to begin with,
んなのどうやって使えってのよ
indeed, Aoko was still in the dark when it came to that magic, whatever it was. She woke from her momentary hallucination. The very illusion of her breaking soul had shown her. Whining had the opposite effect on her. Her pride was now ablaze.
逃げるのか
Soujyuro was right. Her opponent had put her in check, but she had done the same to it. It was clear why she was losing, so now all she needed was a counterplan, well within her abilities. No matter the odds, she was not one to give up without giving it one last shot.
俺ですもんやめることを全部やってから
Her numbed fingers clenched into a tight fist. She was betting against the house, an unreasonable gamble that should have made her question her own sanity. If her first step was off by an inch, her body would be instantly vaporized. But she knew a boy who never fled. She knew of a steadfast courage that could shine its light, no matter how small, through any desperate situation. Yes, there was more than just herself to be concerned about. If that ice fell, it would mean the destruction of the park in its entirety. Everything he had achieved, everything he had risked and dared and happily put his life on the line for, would all be for naught.
本当それじゃあ何のために意地を張ったかわからない
Determination and confidence surged through her like electricity. She was in no mood to be crushed by a giant sheet of ice. If she was going to lose, she would rather do so as the grandest firework possible. Aoko was a sore loser, and at this point, she would rather burn herself to cinders than let it decide her end. grunted in pain. Energy raged through her body. Her circuits were on the verge of disintegration. Inscribed upon her body, her magic crest was magecraft given physical form. It did not, however, stop with simply skin and flesh. It burrowed to the very marrow of her bones. A playful smile graced her lips. Her sense of reason had been turned upside down by the pain. This was only natural. She had to praise her own body for holding out so long while pushed beyond its limits. The skull face noticed the abnormality. It finally recognized the challenge for dominance over this space. It laughed at the conceit it faced. Never did it expect a magician to challenge the great Flat Snark, lord of vessels over a millennium, and in such an age of decline. She tried to catch her breath. She braced herself for the coming pain. She was going to smash that ice to pieces. Both had access to the same amount of magical energy. One of them was greatly outmatched, but when in doubt, bigger gun. The feedback would go beyond anything she had experienced to date. Quite simply, her decision went beyond recklessness. She expanded both formulae to maximum size. The first layer would transform into a giant vortex, swallowing up the mist. The second layer would process it from one end and pump it into her, the barrel. Now there's the Aoko we know and love. Primeval power answered the spellcaster's conviction. It formed the pattern of a writhing serpent. Voiceless magical power flew a banner of revolution. Now, look upon the earth, O venerable one. See now this pioneer, this first among trailblazers. She embodies a species that knows no fear, that renders not all manner of mystic and tradition. For the newest magician commands the principles of consumption and extinction. An aberrant bullet of light melted through the castle of ice. The barrel held fast. Her control of magical energy was divine. 100,000 miles of veins, equal to 2.5 times the circumference of the Earth, hungrily drank in the magical energy. The subsequent magical strike hurtled straight up at the moon. No, no, no. Death rose from the moon's surface. A cry of indignant terror echoed throughout the abandoned park. Reality was burned into the eyes of this creature of fantasy. To Aoko, its vain struggle was the taste of victory. Victory despite her absolutely reckless use of magical energy. The energy scales had been tipped to their breaking point, but nevertheless in her favor. Oh, so cool. Shatter, 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 shatter. The skyscraper shattered into atomized dust. The island, its unattainability extolled, had swallowed the whole of the despair of its many challengers. Long had it proudly eluded mankind's intellect. Yet now, azure mist bemoaned its demise. In the sky, the icy canopy crumbled. The snark-hunting bullet jumped over the moon. Its throes of death sounded like the roaring sea, reverberating across this fairy tale land. The battle was over. The thick fog dissipated, and the shattered ice melted away before it hit the ground. A lethal bullet unseated the Night King from his throne, affording him no time to grieve his loss. The oil of the moon, the untouched, flat snark. The dreamscape that had begun with its resurrection ended with its demise, drawing a close to the nightmare. Flat on her back, Aoko looked up at the night sky. She lay there perfectly still, not able to move a single finger. When she tried, her whole body screamed out in agony. She was completely empty of magical energy, and her magic crest had come to a halt. She estimated that it would likely require a whole day to recover all her bodily functions. Sadly, all she could really do in that moment was take a breath. At least her chest was swelling with pride. She had gone toe-to-toe with a fairy tale monster and had emerged victorious. The battlefield conditions had favored her, it was true, but there was no denying that Aoko had come a long way in the last 6 months.
それはそれとしてアリスには謝っとかないと。黒いって壊したらそれっきりだもんね。
Flat Snark would never again return to this world. It was an insanely rare item, so invaluable that it would have been impossible to price it at auction at the Association in London. Aoko had sent Alice's priceless treasure to oblivion. Needless to say, things had gotten more than a little out of hand. They'd have both agreed to a fight, so Alice probably would not complain. Even if she was furious, she would never be so indignified as to show it. The second Aoko relaxed, her fatigue finally caught up with her. She did everything in her power to fight off the overwhelming drowsiness. Aside from a few minor internal injuries, her body was miraculously unscathed. She felt like she could probably stand up and dust herself off after a bit of rest. The golden moon continued to burn in the night sky. Aoko's bleary eyes went wide in astonishment. She was still unable to lift a finger. She sighed in resignation. Aoko accepted that her final stand left her with only 10 seconds, before she burned to ash too. Elsewhere, just a short moment prior, buffeted by strong winds atop the roller coaster, Soujyuro gravely peered down at the ground. All he could muster was a single murmur. He could see Aoko on top of some drawing on the ground, and in the distance, There was something familiar in the direction of the ruined House of Mirrors. Sojuro's job, to throw Aoko's hair from a great height, was complete. While not the most impressive of tasks, it was absolutely a matter of life or death. And to top it all off, just thinking about how he was going to get back down to the ground was making him dizzy. He had experienced more than enough trouble for one day.
いやでもあれ
He was flustered as he stood atop the swaying bridge. A skull suddenly appeared in the sky above. On the ground, he could see a circling blue light with Aoko Aozaki in the middle of it. And one more thing. From an angle that only Soujyuro could see, a shadow stalked Aoko while she challenged the moon. It was shaped like a person missing the lower half of its body. The dang thing was still alive. The disembodied torso slowly clawed its way towards Aoko. They were still over 600 feet apart. Unfortunately for Aoko, she completely failed to notice it approaching from behind.
遠くて見えないけどあれは
He was sure of what it was now. There was only one thing in the park that would chase Aoko, and not him. The puppet.
いやほらあるいはひょっとしてただの偶然ではないだろうか
His mind ran in circles. It was a perfectly reasonable reaction. Any grip on reality he might have had left was long lost when Aoko started firing beams of light at the monstrous moon. Aoko's merciless fire buffeted the roller coaster like a storm. Just standing on it was almost enough for him to be thrown off and killed. At any rate, Soujyuro couldn't fathom the situation. Should he head back to the entrance of the roller coaster and warn Aoko about the incoming threat? No, there was no way he would make it in time. And to make matters worse, there's a hoard of bread down there waiting for him. And it may have very well have been the case that Aoko was already aware of the puppet and would take it out as soon as he got closer. If she was, Soujyuro was sure he would only be in the way. But it did not seem like there was anything he could do to help. And beyond that, Aoko was not only the one in danger, he was in quite a predicament himself. Can't go home yet. Or again. The road home was never as safe as one thought. It was as true here as it had been in the mountains. The path he was on was no exception. As risky as the ascent had been, it was even more dangerous to go back down. This was no time to be worrying about others. His shaking legs reminded him that only 200 feet separated him from death.
大丈夫それは分かっている
His head was pounding. This was reckless and stupid. Having been raised in the mountains, he was more sensitive to danger than anyone raised in the city, and just thinking about what he was about to do made his throat seize up. There was only one thing he could say for sure.
青崎のことだあれに絶対気づいていない
With a sobbing shout, Soujyuro started making his way down the 200-foot frame of the roller coaster. His race towards death accelerated. He never meant to speed up, but the downward slope propelled him forward. It was too late for regrets now. Now that he was running, he had no choice but to go even faster. And time was not on his side. He would never make it in time if he took the long way down, never mind the breadmen crowding the exit of the roller coaster. With the exits blocked, the outcome would be the same whether he went slowly or quickly. There was no reason to rush to his death as desperately as he did. So what if it was futile? Soujyuro cleared the doubts from his mind. He turned his attention to what he could do. Keep his footing, and try to arrive at the bottom as quickly as he could.
間違えるな。今大事なのは間に合うとか助けられるとかそういう結果の話じゃなくて。
He had no idea what impulses were driving his stiff limbs. He just focused on the moment, pushing past the fear and the cold logic. At his core, he was the kind of person to deal with problems head on. There would be time to think about the consequences later. But hesitation was not his only obstacle.
こんな時に
The worst possible hindrance appeared at a time when not focusing on the track would mean certain death. Something had changed. And at the very moment he realized it,
よそ見してる場合じゃない。
Soujyuro stumbled and instinctively caught himself. It was a miracle he had not fallen. Descending on a roller coaster on foot was an act of suicide. The egg stayed right by his side, so close it was likely it would collide with him. Though he was trying not to look at it, he could not help but feel unease that the door-like decoration in its center was gradually opening.
ああもうちくしょう。なんだってこんな。
He cursed his rotten situation, and yet he refused to slow down. He ran even faster, glaring at the egg on his side.
本当おかしい。こんな状況なのになんで。
Soujyuro was baffled to find that he was smiling. Perhaps it had something to do with Aoko's charm. Soujyuro couldn't tell one way or the other. He could still feel Aoko's fingers on his skin. The trust and expectation she had placed in him was etched into his heart. But what spurred him on was something entirely different. This all stemmed from a much deeper problem. It was something inside him that he could not understand at the time, but would eventually come to terms with one day.
距離は今なら2メートル弱。
He carefully judged the distance as he ran down the track of death. But the distance between what? That went without saying. It was the distance between himself and the one thing that could save his life. He told himself he was going to do it, over and over, like a mantra. Soujyuro couldn't believe himself. What he was about to do was incredibly stupid. But what is stupid when smart isn't an option?
本当なんでそこまでやるんだ。
Amidst it all, he laughed at how pointless such self-reflection was now. Temporary confusion, a psychological thrill ride, both had laid his soul bare. What really mattered in life? The answer to that question was simple. His primitive values did not crave success or reward. All he wanted was
よし。
to live the way he wanted. It wasn't an obligation to the people around him. His desire to live his way was his and his alone.
行こう。
If the Ed had been equipped with vocal function, it would have gasped in shock at what happened next. The boy, who had only tried to escape up until this point, suddenly shifted his weight. He pointed his feet outward instead of inward. On the edge of one rail, he crouched ever so slightly to maintain momentum and gazed at the floating egg.
やれる。距離的に問題はない。
He soared through the night sky. It was a flight that lasted a mere 1.5 seconds, a cordless bungee jump from 100 feet above the ground. His destination? The only thing that would stop his fall, the giant flying egg. He shrieked, this time out of elation as he desperately clung to the egg's surface. Just earlier, the cold-blooded witch had told him that without fear, the top of a building would feel no different than a balance beam. This from the same witch that would have been left speechless had she witnessed the spectacle. It was one thing to be fearless, and another to be reckless. What the boy did next would give her a headache in the days to come. Clinging to the egg, he shifted his gaze away from it. He felt the rapid descent. Soujyuro, focusing his half-shut eyes on the ground, leaped off the egg once they were a few feet from the ground, then turned back to it, careful to re-establish eye contact. Something so unbelievable. Though to Soujyuro, the elevator at the department store and the mysterious floating egg were both just moving objects, virtually indistinguishable from one another. Bless this boy. He landed near the plaza. The shortcut that almost cost him his life had paid off. Soujyuro took off running the second his feet touched the ground. The puppet after Aoko was the only thing on his mind. He paid no mind to the moonlight in the sky. Nor to the egg, which was furious about being used, and seconds away from self-destructing and blasting fragments all over the place. Aoko's dumbfounded expression spurred Soujyuro on. The curse was complete. The empty egg began to sing its warning to let them know there was no escape. Shrapnel from the egg exploded throughout the air. The ode to Queen Alice that Alice had engraved into Dumpty quickly robbed him of his senses. He snapped back to the task at hand and ran to Aoko, still lying on the ground. His legs moved as if they had a mind of their own, though he couldn't have stopped them anyway, since he could no longer feel them. The scrambled murder case. Piles of rubble became flowers of light blooming from the earth. The final curtain drew closed, and the defeated left the battleground. It's mighty ironic as well that the puppet that looks like Aoko, that was sent to kill her, ended up being one of the things that saved her life. Had Alice Koonji seen it happen, she would have been beside herself. The two had escaped by a hair's breadth. The only person in a position to witness that rare mutual destruction was the girl who had been saved from it. The boy who had never stopped running paid it no mind. The safety of the girl in his arms meant infinitely more to him than the miraculous way in which he had saved her. The moon did not wait for dawn to set. The ornamental texture of the fairy tale kingdom faded away. All of the illusions returned to the way that they were before. From the ostentatious chords reverberating throughout the streets, to the puppets welcoming their guests. Peace and quiet reigned once more, over a forgotten kingdom never to be awakened again. Out flickered the embers of a late-night dream, even the electric lamps that illuminated the park. Together, they watched it disappear. Soujyuro lay on the ground, desperately gaping for air like a fish out of water. The curse of the exploding egg had numbed his pain, and he was understandably exhausted after all he had experienced. He looked like he could be blown away by the lightest of breezes. While Aoko was also exhausted, she was still in better shape. Focused on taking deep, even breaths, she was already working to recover her strength. She addressed Soujyuro indifferently as her gaze remained on the amusement park. The abruptness of it was a bit theatrical in nature. She wanted to look at him as she spoke, but her pride was simply too great. The moment she had accepted death had seemed like an eternity. She was beside herself in shock at how indifferent she had been as the shards rained down from the moon. But a reassuring voice had snapped her back into reality. Why did he do it? What was he thinking? What moronic things had he done to pull it off? She had no answers for these questions, lying on the ground as she was. All she knew was that he had more than made up for his failure in the House of Mirrors and then some, in those fateful final moments. She addressed him, hoping to find answers, but found herself unable to probe any further. To dig any deeper would feel like defeat, which is why it's so unlike her to ask him in the first place. Lucky for her, Soujyuro had neither the capacity nor sensitivity to understand how egocentric she was being. He stuttered between labored breaths. It was taking him so much effort just to breathe that he could not address her properly. She watched him out of the corner of her eye. Thinking back on it, the boy had performed the same role each time. Each and every time, he did what he could in spite of his fecklessness. It was far more admirable than her nearly suicidal tactics, even if she did defeat her opponent. He did not even recognize how extraordinary his last act of courage was. At the very least, he had the courage to keep trying whatever he could. A spectator might have viewed him as a supporting actor. His actions were not exactly memorable, but the lead actress he supported did not see it that way. Such inspired actions were wasted in her supporting role. This guy really pulled off the impossible. It was so amazing that she wanted to shout it as loud as she possibly could for all the world to hear. I love these two. All Aoko could do was sigh. How could she not? Even she was forced to admit that the way he'd snatched her from the jaws of death was dashing. Truth be told, he was a lunatic for doing what he did. She steadied her breathing and composed herself. While she was in bad shape, she still had her pride as a mage to consider. That was why she felt a need to maintain an air of dignity. One good turn deserves another. She hastily extended her right hand. It was either to shake his or to help him up. However, Soujyuro did not take her hand, but instead stood up on his own. This night, despite the sheer insanity that he had just experienced, his face had not once looked as incredulous as it did now. She stammered, worried that she had deeply embarrassed herself. Sojuro's gaze was fixed upon Aoko. A problem had dawned on Aoko. Though she normally hated being stared at, this time she didn't mind. Rather, she was enjoying the warmth in his eyes and felt like it was something she could almost come to appreciate. The conversation came rushing back. It was a memory better left forgotten. Pushing Tobimaru's words out of her mind, Aoko turned to Soujyuro. Puzzled, Soujyuro tilted his head. He responded matter-of-factly to her sudden declaration. The soon soon does not work on my boy Sonoji. She certainly had pointed that out, and to his face, no less. It had a mere figure of speech that he was not meant to take literally, but now was not the time to belabor the point.
そうじゃなくて、あなたが私に惚れてても期待しないでって言ってるの。
Yet, belabor she did anyway. Aoko blushed slightly, realizing how inane she was being. She wondered how she had ended up in this position. And yet, she knew that she had to get this off her chest. All that was left was politely wait for his response. Such heartbreakingly painful words were too much for the simple boy to hear. His shoulders slumped as if the world was coming to an end. Or so Aoko had imagined. On the contrary, Soujyuro was sitting there deep in thought.
俺が青崎に惚れてるって
Soujyuro murmured the words as if they were a magic spell. She shot right back with the affirmative. After a moment of deep contemplation, the boy turned to the expectant girl and said,
なんで
The curse of Tobimaru's foot and mouth disease shall never end. He had to be joking, but he was not. He was completely serious. He liked her, but he didn't like her. Of course, the vice president had jumped to conclusions. This boy had no interest in romance. He probably didn't even know what it was. Oh. She's vibrating out of frustration and embarrassment. She was incredibly embarrassed by how confused Soujyuro still appeared to be. Her rosy complexion spread throughout her entire body.
もう一度聞くけどなんで
Oh, not the right hook. Poor Sonoji, poor Soujyuro is just paying for Tobimaru's mistakes. Poor man. Just like that, she had lost her cool and given in to an unjustifiable outburst. It was time to seal off the area and destroy all the evidence. Aoko's embarrassment devolved into sheer panic, and her grudge against Tobimaru suddenly manifested as criminal assault. She lashed out with a punch that could have taken down a bird mid-flight. More specifically, it was a brutal right hook. Aoko blinked. Her blow had connected with something solid, snapping her out of her reverie. Her temper had lashed out at the completely defenseless Soujyuro. It had been a splendid blow, with all her weight behind it, knocking him out cold. Soujyuro groaned, crumpling to the ground. Her punch finishing the job that the curse had started. If not for the discomfort on his face, he appeared almost to be sleeping. Aoko convinced herself that he was napping, not concussed. The tension in her shoulders eased away as she looked down at Soujyuro. A ton had gotten in her way over the course of today, but the day was saved, for now. With nobody left to butt heads, she felt exhaustion finally overtake her. Her fatigue was enough to make her complain out loud. When she thought about it, she realized that this was the first time she had used up all of her magical energy, and the first time she had participated in a battle of this scale without any prior preparation. Though in truth, she felt somewhat proud as she whispered those words. Normally, it was something that she would beat herself up over, but instead, she simply shrugged her shoulders with a bitter smile. After all, it was thanks to the person sleeping by her side. As if the night had swallowed her voice before it reached him, she received no response. Confident, she continued in an even quieter voice.
ありがとう。十分に助けてもらったわ。
Of course, there was no response from Soujyuro, and she was not expecting one. Saying it for the record was enough. Aoko watched Soujyuro sleep for a while and then pulled something out of her pocket. It was the palm-sized glass bottle her roommate had given her, which she opened with a pop.
でも、それとこれとは別だから。
Leaving behind words colder than a winter chill at night, she called out his name. She barely sensed the... What appeared to be a human form could clearly be seen inside the glass. Alice Kuonji's tools were mystics that confounded even the most knowledgeable of mages. As soon as Aoko tried to analyze them with logic or reason, she was already out of her depth. Knowing this all too well, Aoko closed the bottle and watched the boy disappear, as if by some magic trick.
まったく、こんなの手品じゃなくて魔法だって。
She muttered as she looked into the magical bottle. Its weight had not changed significantly, and she had no idea how it worked. But the one thing she did know was that there was a human being inside of it. Its light weight was almost unnerving, closer to empty air than a human being. It was about as heavy as one would expect if they'd bottled a summer breeze. Though, that did fit her image of Soujyuro perfectly.
アリスの言う通り、
She muttered to no one in particular as she recalled the past.
ほんと、私らしくない。
Aoko wore a bittersweet smile. Her usual moodiness was gone. It was a dangerous world out there. It was good to have someone to keep her on her toes. With a wry chuckle, she flicked the magic bottle with her finger and set off walking. She could hear a bell in the distance, signaling the end of the play. An ephemeral dream gave way to reality. In the grand scheme of things, it had been but an instant. As the actors exited stage left, the last of the lights silently flickered out. And so, the long-dead amusement park played its final role as a memory for a boy and a girl. Like a dog. Now let's save. Whew! I hope you guys had buckled up for that, because we went through a whole lot of stuff. And I don't know if you could tell from my voice coming out and being a little bit more expressive, and the fact that I spoke less, especially towards the climaxes there, of Aoko's showdown and then Sojuro's incredible antics. But I really, really enjoy that section of the story. And if you enjoyed it as well, I appreciate you being along with the ride. And look forward as well, if you're not familiar with the story, to even more, because we are only about halfway in. So let's throw down a save. Go ahead and do that. And then, before long, we will stream a little bit more again, because we've got a whole lot more ground to cover, and a whole lot of cool stuff to see. A whole lot of funny stuff, too. Alright, guys. I appreciate you being here and spending some time with me on your Saturday. I hope it was a good time. I had a great time. And I look forward very much to spending some more time with you guys in the near future. Happy Sunday, guys, and enjoy your weekend. Peace.